if you want to pop into the chat so that we know that you can tell us things. Oh, we've got someone saying hello. Oh, you.
William again. William has been a star every single session. Great. Kaylin's here, who I think has also been to every single session.
Absolutely. And writing poetry to Fictionary, so that's amazing.
Writing poetry to Fictionary. Incredible. Adrian's here. Awesome. Kathy's here.
And kind. Good word.
Yes. Very good word.
I'm getting the t-shirt.
Be kind.
Yeah, well, we're making a t-shirt. I'm still trying to convince Christina we need merch, so it's gonna happen.
Yeah, Shane the merch man.
We need that one.
Kind power, says Jean. Yeah, we'll love that.
I'm just gonna let everyone come in. And if we can just keep an eye on the attendees.
Thank us for judging, Adrian. Thank you for entering.
Right. Right. Allow to talk. There we go. Found Sherry. Hi, Sherry. Can you manage to get your camera on?
It's not on.
Oh, hang on.
I don't see a camera option here. But my camera is
unless you're
on.
a dragon.
I don't see a camera option on my screen right now. Oh, there we go. There we go.
Yeah. Left. You have been promoted to panelist. You should be able to camera.
Righty-ho, that's looking good. Brilliant, fantastic. Righty-ho, so I'm going to get started and I'm going to read everybody's bio, and then once I've done that, we're going to talk about our experience of judging the Book of the Year 2022, and it was such an amazing experience, and it's really helped me get to know these wonderful judges around this table here. So let's start with Cara, because that's the first one that's opened. So Cara Henderson is passionate about story, and she loves working with authors to help them make their manuscript the best version of the tale they've created. When using Fictionary, she will give you an objective edit. She encourages you in what you do well, and she'll help you figure out what needs to be tweaked to make your story to be as good as it can be. And I met Cara when I was on the Fictionary certification course, and she was in there helping out with Christina, and it's absolute huge mentor. Adore her. And next one in line is Pam. Pam was also on the Fictionary certification course. That was quite a good course, really. You'll find out why. So Pam says that I'm a Fictionary certification story coach editor, StoryGrid certified editor, writer and doctor. Amazing. With a passion for speculative fiction. I love helping writers bring authenticity to their speculations, flow to their structure, and heart to their stories. So yes, Pam was on the same certification course. And so the next one is Sherry Leclerc. Sherry is a Fictionary certified, awesome, a certified story coach editor, Fictionary content creator, certified copy editor, educator, independent author of fantasy and sci-fi books. She's the owner operator of Teneus Publishing and Editorial Services, through which she offers various editorial services and writing and publishing advice. She also has a YouTube vlog focused on providing information on writing, editing, and author tools and resources to new and aspiring writers. Sherry happily resides in a chaotic household in Sydney, Nova Scotia, with her husband, 2 sons, dog, cat, and 2 birds. And yeah, guess where I met Sherry? Right. So the next one, Ryan. We have here Ryan Rivers is the author of the Bucket List Mystery series featuring Levi Blue and Shotanka. By day, Ryan teaches technical writing and stops the spread of unnecessary adverbs and vague pronoun references. By mid-afternoon, early evening, he fights crime with his trusty sidekick toddler son. Together, they have uncovered who, in fact, has got your nose and tracked the elusive peekaboo. They live and eat and occasionally sleep in northern Texas with their Brussels Griffon pup, Ryan is a Fictionary Certified StoryCoach editor, a Gallup Certified Strengths Coach, and a member of the Alliance of Independent Authors. Guess where I met Ryan? On the certification course. And Ryan,
it's a mystery.
It's a mystery. And then last but definitely not least is Shane Millar. Shane is the author of the Myth and Magic and Chosen Vampire Urban Fantasy series, writing as S.W. Millar, and the Write Better Fiction craft guides for writers. He is also the co-host of the Storytellers Face Off podcast and the Community and Customer Success Manager at Fictionary. Shane holds a BA in journalism and is a member of the Alliance of Independent Authors, ALI. He lives in Buckinghamshire, England. He has taken too many writing courses to count and enjoys reading as much as possible. Shane is obsessed with 5 things: the writing craft, mythology, personal development, food, and martial arts movies. Shane Millar is the author. Oh, that's perfect. About to repeat myself.
Oh, so good. You were going to repeat it again.
It was so good. I wanted to see it again. So all these brilliant people were...
Hey, you didn't say where you met me. Where did you meet me?
Oh, where did I meet you? Was it on the certification course, the Fictionary Certification course, which is one of the most phenomenal courses out there on story. We've all taken lots of courses on writing because we're all a bit of enthusiastic about our courses. And the Fictionary Certification course is one of the best places to not only learn about story, but also get in your social group and people who are hugely qualified to help you out, because writing should never be lonely. Writing should be about community. And when you go through that course, you become so close to the people who are in your cohort. Right. So let's have a look at what the judging felt like for everyone. So let me start with Sherry. What did you learn from judging all the entries and the first scene?
Oh, you went to first thing is specific.
Yes.
I kind of did a write up. I didn't write anything about the first scene in specifically, but I don't know what to say about that. It's about the first scene.
Sorry.
But I'll first of all, I just wanted to say it's been a pleasure and a privilege to be one of the judges for the Fictionary Book of the Year award. And I loved seeing all of our authors who are participating show up in the community, asking questions, participating in events and all of that. And like Lucy was just saying, it's really, I think, great that we have this community of like-minded people where we can kind of talk and share ideas. So this is actually the only book award where I've seen authors who are also offered support system. So instead of just submitting a book blind, crossing their fingers and hoping for the best, participants in the Fictionary Book of the Year award are offered support, advice, and information to help along the way. So I've loved seeing how participating authors have used that to their advantage in improving their writing and preparing for the award program. And I'm also proud to be part of this process. So I've actually seen people in the community asking questions and showing how they'd applied that to their work. And that to me has been really exciting. So I think one thing that I learned over the years that was really reinforced through this process is how important the community is. Because when I started writing, it was like, it was almost like writing in a bubble. There was no community like that I could go to talk. So I think that this is, I guess, a great community, a great process. And I was really happy to see the participants in the events asking questions and then using what they got from the community to help improve their writing from the long list to the short list. You could see all of that being applied and used there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sherry. So Pam, what did you learn from judging all the entries?
Well, first of all, I learned that there's a lot of heart that people put into their stories, and you could really feel it as you were reading it. But we've got, it was 60 something submissions, blurb, synopsis, and first up to 2,000 words. The adult category was 43 submissions. I counted this up just because I'm such a nerd. And it's like 118,000 words we had to read. And so the first thing I learned, and I kind of wrote a blog post about some of this too, is oh, thank goodness that wasn't me.
Sorry, that was me.
The first thing I learned was how to manage a big project, right? A novel is a big project, and judging 43 distinct submissions with focus and genuine interest requires really some management skills. And so I used a spreadsheet to keep track of everything, and then we also had a way to kind of quantify the different elements as we went along. And so that was one thing. The other thing that I really learned is that successful story execution requires really good feedback, right? You feel like, and for the most part in the beginning, you are alone as you're planning and writing and drafting, but really to get a idea how your book plays and is received, you have to put it out there in little and large ways. And so this was one of the large ways people put that out there. And I was really pleased and excited to be part of that. And the last thing I'll talk about was that openings matter, right? And if there was one thing that stood out for all of us as we were reading the manuscript, is that the reader's attention really does rest on the emotional engagement with the opener. And so really focus on your opener with the reader in mind, not you, or in my case, me, thinking, well, they woke up one day and the tornado happened, etc. So again, to ratchet back up, effectiveness requires getting good feedback about that. Does that work? So those are my three biggies.
Right. Ryan, what did you learn from judging the first section?
Well, first of all, congratulations to everyone who submitted. It was a wonderfully eye-opening, exciting process, and I loved reading everybody's work. I would say that the major takeaways that I had from this process is that it just really reinforced these universal fixtures of story, and really what it makes Fictionary so wonderful, regardless of the genre, regardless of whether you're writing for young adults or for quasi-adults like myself. These 5 story points the story arc are so universal, and you see that reflected when you get 60, 70 different submissions. It all is about the beats and how well they connect and the emotional depth of the character. I would say that, reading these first chapters, because we got to read 60, 70 first chapters, I would really say that once again, so important to really understand who your protagonist is, what he or she wants, what is driving he or she, but also, elements like tension and conflict. All of those things, even if they're on a micro level, need to be reflected in those initial chapters, because that is really the promise that you're giving to the readers about what the rest of the story will be about.
Brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. Right, Cara, what did you learn from the first round of judging?
Again, I would say thank you again for all you brave souls who put your work out there. It was a real privilege to be able to have a look at what you've done, and for you to be willing to take our feedback. I think that first round, one of the things I learned, or the 2 things that came out of it are, 1, pay attention to the parameters that you've been given. So for instance, we had one story in the young adult category that was brilliant, but the blurb was well over the word count. And so that's an automatic dismissal because you didn't follow the parameters. And so make sure you're understanding the rules to the contest that you're entering, I guess, is really what it is. And just to sort of, so, because if you submitted that to the agent, they would just toss it right away as well, which is what we were kind of trying to put out there. And then I think the other thing was the beginnings as well. And so again, there was a couple of those really great, but you put in a prologue that was too ethereal or didn't make sense for what it was, and it didn't have that. And if you've only got 2,000 words to submit, if you're putting 750 or 1,000 words into a prologue that is not eye-catching or doesn't make sense unless you read the rest of the story, you have to sort of think about what that's going to do for somebody that you're submitting this to. Yeah, I think those are from that first round, those were the two big takeaways. But way to go for submitting anyways, because this is your heart and your baby and you're putting it out there. And so thank you for letting us have a look at them.
Right, Shane, what did you learn from judging all the entries in the first scene?
Yeah, so a couple of things, and some of them have been mentioned already, but I'll go through some of the unique things that I spotted. So in terms of the submissions themselves, I just want to say whether you shortlisted or not, whether you win or not, you're all winners because you had the courage to submit to this contest. And like Cara said, it was a real privilege to get to read your work. Absolutely fantastic from our side of things. So I think two main things that I learned really. The scenes that drew me in from the first round of judging were those scenes where people had a really solid grasp of what a scene or the shape a scene should follow. And if you've been around Fictionary for a while, you'll have seen that we do a shape of a scene event every so often that kind of talks about structure on a scene level. So those scenes that drew me in, and probably the other judges as well, were those that had the elements of a scene. So a solid entry hook that made me ask a question to myself and think, oh, I need to read on to discover the answer to this. And excuse me, the shortlisters were particularly good at doing that, obviously, because they shortlisted. And then we also had, point of view goal, like Ryan was saying. It's people who have a main character that is the point of view that's driving the scene, that does want something. People who understand that in the middle of a scene, the stakes need to go up or there needs to be some kind of emotional shift. People who resolve that, the thing that the character wants at the climax, do they get it? Do they not get it? And then a solid exit hook that leads us into the next scene, or in this case, made us want to read the full manuscript when we shortlisted. And I think the other major thing that I learned is that because, the whole point of this contest was to kind of approach a contest from an objective point of view. I mean, if you've ever entered contests out there, the majority of them are the judges going, well, we liked this, we didn't like this. So that's how we're going to judge whether you get shortlisted or not. What we wanted to do was use the fictionary story elements to really give an objective, our objective opinion, as it were. Is that even a thing? An objective opinion? I don't know. But we wanted to keep it objective. And so the thing that I learned is that when we came to shortlist those first scenes, we pretty much, all the adult judges and all the young adult judges, we pretty much had the same top 5 that we ended up shortlisting. So that just goes to show you that if you do understand story structure, if you do understand the shape of a scene, you're more likely to be successful in these things. And it was a real eye-opener to me that we all kind of picked the same stories for our shortlisters.
That's brilliant. Right. So for me, what did I learn from judging? That is how powerful it is to build a scene properly, because we all get taught the theory, and we all try to practice it. But as everyone's saying, understanding deep structure is so important, because you get drawn in. And when you have that point of view goal there at the beginning, you want it answered at the end, because if it's not answered at the end, then the reader might think that you're not going to answer the whole story goal across the whole story. So they might not invest fully in the whole story. And then again, I learned how brave everyone is in the Fictionary community, because you would put your blurbs out there into the community and ask fellow competitors to help you. And you were also generous with your feedback and honest and true. And none of you were unkind. And that was just absolutely glorious to see. And for me, that was absolutely one of the most beautiful parts of the contest, was seeing how generous you all were with your time to help each and every one of you. Because could you imagine next year, when we open it up again, or this year, but we open up this year's one, if we could get everybody winning, wouldn't that be brilliant? So yes, so that's what I really enjoyed the most, and I learned the most about from that first session. So let's go around the room again. This time, shall we start with Ryan? What was your biggest surprise?
My biggest surprise, I would say my biggest surprise was how much I enjoyed reading outside of my comfort zone. I'm pretty niche in terms of my reading preferences, in terms of the books that I like to work on as an editor. And it was really nice to get beyond that and read all of these really wonderful stories that had deep, rich characterization and knew how to plot a scene. And despite the fact that they were writing in different genres, even the sci-fi and the fantasy, there was real humanism in all of the characters and in the settings. And so I think for me, it broadened my understanding of story. I think the other thing that surprised me as a writer and an editor myself was the power of the blurb and the synopsis. As an indie writer, as an indie author, I don't often write synopses because I'm not usually trying to target an agent, but I realized that that's an exercise that I have started to adopt in my own work, because it really does allow you to distill your story down to its basic story arc and really ensure in an easy way, if you are fulfilling the promise that you're, if you have a protagonist who, you know, goes through all 5 of those story elements and is impacted in some way or the other. And then of course with the blurb, you know, which we all write, is really the more markety-ish approach to that. So I would say, you know, as an academic by day, that synopsis is really your blueprint that you use for yourself, and in addition to attracting an agent. But your blurb is the more, you know, markety version of that really gives that promise. So I would say those were the biggest surprises for me.
Brilliant. So Pam, you next. What was the biggest surprise for you from being a judge?
So I would say how much I kind of became a fangirl for each story. So I would read it and I would like, it's like I was rooting for the story. I was rooting for the heroine or the hero. I'm rooting for the writer. I'm just like all in. So it was really great for me to take a story that might have had some elements that needed a little work or even a lot of work, but I was still all in, right? And so I think that's my thing. I mean, how much the writers were able to draw me in. So bravo, finalists.
Right. So Cara next. What was your biggest surprise from the judging? You're on mute. Cara, you're on mute.
Still on mute.
You know, if somebody calls in the middle of a call, so you mute yourself to make sure. Yeah. I was trying to think about what my biggest surprise was, and I don't know. I don't really know. I think maybe one of the things that surprised me as I was reading, especially through the 5 finalists, because that's the full novel, was how important details are. So there's a couple of places where, and it wasn't just sort of the book was blue there and it was red there, a mistake like that. It was a fundamental thing, like you would never say the cedar tree was shedding its leaves, or the corgi jumped the 6-foot fence. Maybe corgis can, I don't think so. But it was those things that just kind of, it was actually how much that took me out of a story. And so I guess that would be a real encouragement to authors as you're writing things, don't assume you know about that thing, and maybe just do a quick, Google search. Do cedar trees shed their leaves? No, they're not. So how do we make that better? Because if you're somebody who is a botanist and you read that, you almost want to just chuck the story right then and there. So it's those kind of little things that actually pull you right out of a story. If it's something that actually really surprised me as I read through, because these are mostly unedited works that we're reading. So maybe an editor would have caught that. So it was just that really interesting. It was really interesting to me.
Brilliant. And Shane?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this as we were talking, and some of you have mentioned some of the things already, like reading outside my genre. I wasn't expecting to enjoy this story so much, and I did. All of that stuff is true. But I think the major thing for me was, and we should know this as Fictionary Certified StoryCoach editors, right? We know that character, plot, and setting come as part of a package, as part of a balanced thing. But when I'm writing my own novels, I tend to focus on character more than anything else. And it was interesting reading through, particularly like Kara said, the kind of the 5 shortlisters, actually having to look at character, plot, and setting. It was interesting to see how each of those things is equally important, which, yes, I knew already from a theoretical standpoint, but actually judging a competition and having to kind of, like Kara said, pick out those details, setting details, plot details, character details, to actually realize how interlinked they are. So when the adult judges got together and we discussed who we are, we've chosen for the winner, which obviously I can't reveal just yet as much as I want to. When we got together and spoke about that, we came to the conclusion that, plot can't really exist without a character who fits into that plot. So like Katniss in the Hunger Games is a perfect example. She's a surly, sullen character who fights with a bow and arrow. So her entering the Hunger Games is the perfect plot for her. She already had those skills. So you wouldn't put, say, a 1950s cozy mystery character, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, into the Hunger Games. That probably wouldn't work very well. So yeah, they all these things kind of intermingle. The way the character experiences setting will change depending on who that character is. How the plot unfolds will differ depending on those characters' personality traits. And equally, like I said, like not every plot works for all characters. So that was really interesting to learn for me. And obviously the shortlisters and the winner, they were the most cohesive in terms of character, plot, and setting, and getting them all to kind of work together.
Right, Sherry.
So Shane, I would read Miss Marple Does the Hunger Games.
Well,
So might have something there.
Okay, you go ahead and write that. You're the mystery author, not me.
All right.
All right, Sherry, what's the biggest surprise for you?
I guess there was a few things. Like, first of all, I guess it was kind of surprising to me how hard it was to pick the actual winner at the end, because there were some of them that were so really good. And even the ones that had some maybe structural issues still got me emotionally. So people have this, like, have the story thing down. They know how to draw it in motion. Like, I was in tears for some of them, even though you can still pick out objectively things that might need to work, might need more work. They're still getting that emotional thing. And that's, I think, is very important. That's what's going to get readers into your stories, is being able to draw them emotionally like that. Another thing is, I think it's how people intrinsically understand story without actually being able to kind of pinpoint things. So, for example, I mean, I don't think I'm the only person that noticed this. Then this is why we have the skeleton blurb and the skeleton synopsis now. But one of the things I noticed is that in some people's synopses, they weren't able to necessarily pick out the correct plot points, but they still had those plot points in their stories. So I think that was one of the benefits to actually adding the skeleton blurb and the skeleton synopsis, because people will have those there, because we read stories. We're all readers. We're all writers. People kind of know that these things fit there, but they're not necessarily able to pinpoint them and pick them out of their own stories. And it's hard too, I think, when it's your own story, because you're so close to it as well, to kind of pull back and be able to pick out those things as well. And also another thing that I think people, aside from talking about the story elements, one thing that's really, really important is character motivation. So if the motivation is not strong enough for the character, then just story is not going to work necessarily. So you have to make sure that characters' motivations make sense for that character, and that they're strong enough to actually make that story continue. So as we talk about goal, motivation, conflict, aside from the story elements, they have to have a really strong goal. The stakes have to be strong, and that character has to have a reason, like a strong reason for wanting to reach that goal, and it has to make sense for the story. So that's about it.
That's brilliant. Yes, my biggest surprise was how I got drawn into every single one, even the beginning ones, and then obviously the shortlister. I absolutely got drawn in, and I can visualize each one as if I was part of the story itself, and that was phenomenal. And I do believe that's because we're all looking at these really intrinsically important parts of story, and we are trying to focus on that. And so that was beautiful. There wasn't any in there that I thought, oh, what's this? It was that you could see. And then it's just the more you spend in Fictionary and the more time you get there, you can see a beautiful story, because the story is being built properly. First drafts are fantastic fun. I love writing a first draft. They are messy and everything else like that. They're brilliant. But then it comes to the edit, and that's where the artistry comes in. And that is where we're seeing the Fictionary edited books. And it's beautiful to see, because all the senses, when you can start to see that if you've got at least 3 in there, the world comes alive to you when you're a reader, and just seeing it as a reader and how they would react. It was fantastic. Right. So getting closer and closer to the Boyer announcement, should we go with one last question? What would you recommend for 2023? So Pam, do you want to start off with that for the next Book of the Year award, Fictionary Book of the Year award? What would you recommend?
Oh boy. So take fabulous use of the skeleton blurb and the skeleton synopsis that Fictionary offers you, and that'll help you have a third rail on which to write your book and your scenes, and so that it'll pass through each scene and each kind of event, right? And you won't get lost, and you'll be able to write a synopsis that really reflects what you're trying to do. And as you're writing each scene, you'll be able to refer back to the blurb and really make sure you stay on track in terms of what the goal is, who's the protagonist. There you go.
Brilliant. Right, Sherry.
It's kind of related to what Pam just said. I just recently read a book by Adam Croft, and he mentioned writing the possibility of writing your blurb first, right? Mm-hmm. So you could, like, when you're working on your rough draft, even before you even get to the Fictionary part, just when you're writing, you can consider this. And remember, if you plan stuff ahead of time, you can always change it. So nothing's ever written in stone. So if you're a pantser, you don't have to be afraid of setting these things up and then changing them later. You can change them, right? But even writing that blurb first, so you know who your protagonist is, what is their motivation, what's their goal, are the stakes high enough? So this will kind of help you make sure that these things are strong enough to drive your story all the way through. And then, like we do with the skeleton blurb, well, what we've been recommending for using the skeleton blurb to make sure all of your scenes are connected. So if you write the blurb, make sure everything's, like, the character's strong enough, the motivation is strong enough, the stakes are high enough. And then make sure you're kind of like applying that to all the scenes to make sure it all makes sense together. But just like with the blurb, making sure the whole, that the story goal is strong enough. Make sure your scene goals are strong enough as well. Make sure the stakes for your scenes are strong enough as well. So does that make sense?
Absolutely. Fantastic. Right, let me just pop in the Adam Croft Writing Killer Blurbs and Hooks by Adam Croft. Is that the one, Sherry? Right. Okay, right. So Kari, you next.
Yes and yes. And I think too, just again, watch your parameters, watch the contest requirements, watch what you have to give in. Know that we are judging your stories based on the blurb and the synopsis. So you need to actually have those nailed. There's tons of teaching about that. Take advantage of all the teaching that's going on in the community for you, to make sure that you have your entry package down tight, because at like I said, at some points we just had to go, you didn't meet the requirements. So the read is amazing. The story is fantastic. You're a brilliant writer, but you didn't make it. Sorry. So, which was heartbreaking, to be honest, on some levels, or not on some level, on all levels, but in some instances. And so I think, yeah, just make sure you've got that down. And it does kind of go down to the blurb and the synopsis. Again, I think one of my surprises is just how important that really is in looking at your story. And so make sure you got that nailed down.
Okay, Ryan.
Well, I don't want to repeat too much of what's already said, but William did ask a question that I think kind of what we've been talking about, and he asked a little bit about our process, and he said, do you read the chapter before the synopsis and or the blurb? And I just want to reiterate that, I mean, it was absolutely, brilliant of Lucy and Christina and the Fictionary team to require these 3 different pieces with this judging experience, because for me, I read the blurb first, because after reading that showed me whether or not as an author you could catch my interest. Then I moved on to the blurb. And after I read the blurb, that told me whether or not as an author you could structure a story with a beginning and a middle and an end. And when I moved on then to your first chapter or first couple thousand words, me as an author, you just grab me by the throat and never let go. That tells me if you can tell a story. And so I would just want to reiterate, treat all of these pieces as important. Most of you will already have had your first 2,000 words written, but do not neglect the synopsis and the blurb, because, and I think I speak for all the judges when I say it literally came down often to those 2 documents about whether or not you made it. And it really was the strength of all 3 that got the shortlist down to the shortlist. So all of those are as important, the synopsis and the blurb, as whatever you choose to submit as your sample.
So Ryan, would you confirm which you started with, the blurb or the synopsis?
I started with the blurb. So that told me if you could catch my interest, and then the synopsis was, could you structure a story? And then the writing sample is, can you tell me a good story? So
Brilliant. Right, Shane.
Yes. So what would I recommend? Obviously, like, I don't want to repeat anything that anyone's already said. So guidelines, all these things, really important. I think for me, building on what a lot of the judges have said about the synopsis, the blurb, yes, that's crucial. And it's part of that overall package that we're judging. And it's what an agent would get if you were pitching an agent as well. So that's really key. But the thing, particularly for shortlisters, what I would recommend is that when you have your full manuscript and you have your synopsis, so those key pieces, the synopsis is the summary of your key scenes, so your inciting incident, plot point 1, midpoint, plot point 2, climax, and resolution. When you compare that to your full novel and you do a read through of your full novel before submitting and you look at your synopsis, I would really urge you to make sure that the plot points that you've specified in your synopsis for those things are actually the plot points that end up being in your final novel, because we will compare the 2 and we will say, well, how closely did you follow the synopsis that you submitted to us? Because remember, the synopsis is the promise of the story. That's what you've told the agent that the story is going to be. So if they find something very different in your manuscript, or it doesn't quite meet the expectation that you set in the synopsis, that may be a reason that you wouldn't advance further in a competition or advance further with an agent. So I would definitely recommend that. Jean had a follow-up. So she said, how was the full manuscript judged? So when we got down to the shortlist, each of us read, so Pam, Ryan and myself were the adult judges, Lucy, Cara and Sherry were the young adult judges. When we shortlisted down to 5, we each read the full 5 manuscripts. And we were, like I've just said, we were looking at it based on, does the blurb match the synopsis, and does the synopsis match the full story? We were also looking at things like the story arc itself. So was the inciting incident roughly in the right place? Was the midpoint roughly in the right place? All of these things that Fictionary can help you do. And we were looking at some of the elements. So were there good entry hooks? Did you draw us into each scene? Were there exit hooks? Did you draw us into the next scene? Is the structure of a scene correct? Did the character motivation, like I think Cara was talking about, or Sherry, I can't remember, does the character motivation make sense throughout the novel? Is your character acting in a way that makes sense? So these were the sort of questions that we were asking. So what we weren't doing, which is what we wanted to avoid, was what you'll see in some competitions, which was, well, the judge just happened to like this, so this is what won. This judge didn't happen to like this, so this is not what won. And again, even when it came down to the shortlisters, I think we were all pretty much unanimous on that as well, because we were using this kind of objective framework to judge the competition. So yeah, my biggest takeaway for next year, particularly if you're a shortlister, or even if you've written your full book manuscript, which I would recommend before you submit, make sure that the kind of blurb, synopsis and manuscript make sense as a whole package, because that's what an agent will be looking at.
Right. So my recommendation, we've got 5 minutes left, is get into Fictionary today if you're thinking of entering for next. The cutoff will be at the end of August. Get in there today and get into the community and start asking questions, because we're all there. We all love unpicking. Show your story arc. Let's have a look to see how far apart your story arc scenes are. Are they the correct story arcs? Do they answer the story goal in that particular way that they can? Get into the Fictionary software and really get to understanding. And if you have any questions about anything and how that relates to your work, then start asking for more and more talks and events on that particular issue that you might be having, because that is the way that you can get better. And it's maybe not even about getting in for the competition. It's the way to give yourself the strongest possible story that resonates with the most readers. And that is success. So every single entrant had a strong story because they resonated. And it was really tough to then choose, and then it was tough to then choose again. But when you start to understand how these interlink with each other and really work on each other, that's when you can make stories that absolutely everybody will love, and they'll love buying, which will be absolutely fantastic. So that's my recommendation, is get in and start using and start practicing. Righty-ho. I think that's us done and dusted. So we'll see you all at 1:15 when we'll have Writer's House, and that's great. Thank you very much, all the judges.
Yeah, see you everyone.